what I learned in my life was that my needs didn't matter. Everyone else's did. And that included my wife and my kids foremost. In the kitchen, it was basically a choice. It was like I could leave or I could stay and work on myself. And if I felt better about myself and all that, and I still didn't want to be in the marriage, it was like kind of an opening to talk about.
Because in the end, we're likely not going to die at the same time, right? So we're not going to be together forever. We're going to, I want to give the gift that my kids have a parent that's healthy and functioning and confident, and I want to model that so that they can do that as well. And then with Steve, if him knowing that if he leaves, something, just knowing that we're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hello and welcome to Married and Magnetic, the place for entrepreneurial couples who want to stay happily married.
In each episode, we have real conversations with ordinary couples doing extraordinary things, sharing achievements, everyday joys, challenges, and the mindset and tools that make love the greatest strategic edge.
We are James
And Angela Mitchell,
a real-life married couple. She's a counselor,
and he's a coach,
parents to 3 kids,
and co-founders of Love Intentionally. We've ridden the highs
and lows
of building businesses while working hard to stay happily married. We've lived it, done the work,
got the t-shirt,
and are here to help you do the same.
This is Married and Magnetic, where love, business, and growth collide. Let's dive in, y'all. Welcome to another episode of Married and Magnetic, y'all. We are so excited for our guest today. Some great friends of ours, also in the work, and have an amazing relationship with lots to share. It's Shannon and Steve Hamaker. They have been married for over 20 years and love sharing the real, messy, and magical parts of long-term partnership. Shannon is a speaker, somatic practitioner, and certified sexual health educator. And Steve is an undercover coach who works by day as a graphic designer and by heart holding space for people in everyday life. Together, they share how inner child work and somatic practices helped them reconnect to themselves and each other. As parents, they value presence, emotional growth, and celebrating their kids for who they are, not just what they do. Welcome, Shannon and Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, fun fact, Shannon and Steve and I go way back to my days as an elementary school counselor. They lived in Fort Collins at that time, and their kids went to the school I worked at. And I just remember all my interactions with you, Shannon, just being like, she's cool. She's a cool mom. I like her. And, we had a few interactions over the years, and then they moved away to Tennessee. And then our paths again, because we were both getting into the space of sex and intimacy coaching and work. And so that was just like a fun thing. And now we've had many chances over the years to reconnect through our professional lives. So that's been a fun, what I want to call that, I don't know. Weaving.
Such a small world, and our oldest still remembers you and some of the lessons that you shared with him during that time. So I love how our paths just continue to weave. Yes, synergistic. I think that's the word I was looking for. Yes, awesome. Me too. Well, great. So I'm excited to dive into this, not only because we love you all as people, but for your expertise. Shannon, you in particular, all the work you've done as a sex educator, and especially around this, I know what you're calling midlife magic, that some of us are experiencing the magic of, and our partners are along for the ride as our hormones shift and change at this point in our lives. And then also for just what the two of you have created and all the intention you've put into your marriage. And I think you have so much wisdom to share in that regard as well.
And I think, Steve, to your credit, just being more than along for the ride in this situation, like your partner, like you are in the vehicle and on the train and moving in the same direction. And when we first met, the idea of undercover coach in the heart space wasn't really something that you had fully owned and embodied yet, right? So excited to see how that's evolved with you over this time.
Thank you.
So I guess let's start with your relationship, because I think that's really valuable. You've been together for over 20 years. From what I know, and I know you've shared some on social media and stuff, so I feel comfortable saying this, is that it's not always been easy. And I think anyone who's been together for 20 years, long-term relationships have their ups and downs. So for you all, was there a moment where you kind of looked at each other and went hey, we need to work on us?
Yes. Maybe more than one moment.
I can answer to that because I feel like I got to a point where I had a choice to make. Our time in Colorado was really wonderful. 5 years there, I found myself kind of spun out in a lot of coping mechanisms that are very similar today with men, feeling kind of isolated and alone, not really connecting with other men very well, except for like in a social drinking space, like going to breweries or, things like that, or drinks with the neighbors, and just feeling myself really kind of reliant on kind of alcohol and other just kind of unhealthy coping mechanisms. And so when we left Colorado and went to Knoxville, things kind of came to a head. Shannon had been, on her own, like kind of doing her own thing, doing a lot of work with other women. She was really involved in sex and intimacy at the time, like working with women on that through some businesses she was working in. Just kind of watching her, I always joke, I watched her do all this work on herself while I just stood there and sipped on my bourbon, okay, whatever. And then in Knoxville, when we moved there, things just really were starting to come to a head. I was just not able to sit in my own discomfort. And I had a lot of anger that was kind of stored, and it was starting to seep out in unhealthy ways. So finally, just like one day we're standing in the kitchen and Shannon was like, I just sense so much unhappiness in you, and you weren't always unhappy. When we first met, you were a lot of fun and had a lot of joy. And I just remember her telling me that and just feeling it in my body and being like, yeah, I'm miserable and I don't know why. I knew I genuinely loved her. I loved my kids. I loved my life. The root of it was I didn't love myself because I didn't know that I was going through life and putting everyone else first. I wasn't putting myself first. I wasn't taking care of my needs. What I learned in my life was that my needs didn't matter. And that everyone else's did. And that included my wife, my kids foremost. So in the kitchen, it was basically a choice. It was like I could leave or I could stay and work on myself. And if I felt better about myself and all that, and I still didn't want to be in the marriage, it was like kind of an opening to talk about. And the feeling that I had when we were talking about that was just this real sense of loneliness and sadness. And I had this vision of seeing my kids every other week and living in this place by myself. And I just remember being like, fuck that. That's not what I want. Like I knew in my heart and soul that was not what I wanted. So finally, in the purest form of vulnerability for me, I asked my wife, what do I need to do? And she said, well, you can start with one thing. Just start with one thing and see how that feels. And so I chose meditation, and I signed up for the Calm app's 30 days of meditation, and I didn't miss a day. Every morning before everyone was up, I did a 10-minute meditation with Jeff Warren, who I love very much. He's former alcoholic, drug addict who now kind of runs that app. He's got all kinds of really great 10-minute meditation things on there that I love. And I would challenge anyone out there to check him out. But yeah, so meditation turned into leaning into some men's work. It was COVID at the time, so everything was online. And so I channeled in with some really great men. Jordan Bowditch was sort of the first of who I connected with out of Austin. He's a great guy. I would love to resource him as well in this. And just really just getting, as Jordan says, fun, comfortable, and going into kind of getting myself out there. And so I went to my first somatic retreat in, I think it was 2021, Estes Park, Colorado. And that changed everything for me. That's when I first learned about being in my body and getting out of my head and feeling sensations and all that. And it was magical. And quitting drinking was a big step for me too. That same year I gave up alcohol. It's been 5 years now since I made that step, and it's the clarity and the lack of like this, my social anxiety I've had to sit with it without alcohol, and that's been really challenging, but also very, it's been great. So that's kind of the quick hit version of my story. I think as it relates to our marriage, it has allowed me to understand what's mine and what's hers, as far as when we have something come up, if there's a disagreement, to be able to sit sober, open, asking questions. Do you need support or do you need advice? And if it's support, I just listen. And I've had to work pretty hard on not taking that on as mine. If she's angry about something, she's not maybe angry at me, maybe she's angry at something I did, but just allowing her to voice that and sit with it without being defensive is like that's where the work really hits. So
I
I think
think
I'm
it's,
complete on that. If you have more to add to that, Shannon.
yeah, I'll pause for any questions that you all have, but I did have a couple of threads I was going to add to it and
Yeah,
just highlight.
my question was going to be for you, Shannon, so I'll let you talk and then you might answer it.
Yeah. I think the common thread was we doubled down on ourselves. So, in my experience in 2019, I knew something was off, and this kind of plays into the midlife magic piece where I was 41, 42, and things were starting to shift. Emotions were starting to feel very heightened because during this time of perimenopause, which is on the average, it starts at 41, we start to feel the intensity. It's kind of like the luteal phase of your cycle where your boundaries start announcing themselves very clearly. And if you're not familiar with holding and releasing emotions, it can kind of build up. So I just pressed pause on our marriage and just said, I just need some time and space to kind of figure out what's mine and what's yours and release some of the codependent bonds that we have. So, yeah, when I came to him that day in the kitchen, it was from a very loving place. It wasn't demanding. It was, I love you and this isn't your fault. These are all ways that you learn to stay safe.
Yeah.
And I'm here, but I can't live like this in this marriage. So whatever it is that you need to do that brings you joy, that helps you find yourself, that helps reconnect yourself to you, go do it. And whether that's we separate for a little bit or you go to a retreat or go to figure out what you need. So when he asked me, what do I do? I was like, I mean, everyone's different, but the meditation worked for him.
Yeah.
But even to the point where I think I said, if you need to date other people, whatever it is, I'm going to be okay because I've been working on myself. And some people hear that and they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But I literally was at that point where I felt so confident and clear of knowing who I was because I'd worked so hard on myself that I knew I would be okay. And I wanted him, I lovingly was releasing him to go do whatever because enabling him in that space in our marriage wasn't working. Like it wasn't moving the needle at all. It was just like operating at 60% of our livelihood. And that's not what we wanted to give our kids. And honestly, that's kind of one of the things I said too, was whatever we don't figure out, we're just going to give to our kids because those patterns just continue to get passed down. Yeah. Yeah. So that was my side.
No, I just really think there's a lot of power in this what's mine and what's yours. And I want to double click on this idea of self love. So, Steve, you very clearly were like, I know how to love my spouse. I love them. I know how to love my kids. I'm giving, I'm giving. I find a lot of men that I work with and in general have this challenge with self love. I think that's really where it starts. So, how did you cultivate this self-love within yourself? I'm sure it's a journey, right? So how are you still doing it? And then Shannon, I'm curious, how did you support him on that journey? Because it sounds like you were at least a couple of steps ahead on it.
Yeah, I continued to just take it back to what was mine when things would come up, and I would honor my needs and my boundaries and my emotions. And every single time when I did that, and I came from a place of, these patterns or these stories that we hand down. So I would say, the story I'm telling myself is you are annoyed because I didn't empty the dishwasher. And he would say, I had an email come through for a project that's due and I like activated something in me. So it was really like bringing everything to light and sharing, oh, this is the story I'm telling myself, or this is what's coming up for me. And every time doing that, just saying that and honoring my experience was like a layer of self-confidence and a layer of self-esteem and a layer of boundaries with myself and with Steve. And a lot of it was looking at what I learned from my mom and the patterns that I learned from her, because, mother learning is, we are an extension of mom, whether we're a man or woman, we come from mom. And so we take on a lot of either exactly what mom does, or oftentimes we will rebel and do the opposite thing. So if mom was super nice and a kind of a pushover, some people will be like, I'm not going to take that route. I'm going to be very strong in what my boundaries are. Or they may take it on the same way and be the people pleaser. And so for me, it was looking at what were those patterns that I took from mom that are now playing a part in our marriage that's keeping us small or not honoring my true authentic experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, to answer your question, James, I think what I realized early on was the codependency piece, and I think what you talked about with men and self-love and the lack of self-love is sort of this like need to make sure there's, television has shown us that the husband needs the wife buy-in, right? Like the wife's got to buy in. Like the plans aren't going to happen if the wife's not bought in. Well, it's kind of bullshit. Like if my needs mean I need to go away for the weekend and go on a hike, if I express that to Shannon, she knows that brings me joy. She knows that's like a connection to nature piece that sometimes my introvert needs that time away, away from people. And so she's, if the calendar's open and there isn't a baseball tournament somewhere, she's all in. Learning like what that felt like in my body to be able to honor my needs and express my needs to Shannon, and her to receive that, feel it, and say yes was like, I was like, whoa, really? Like I'm almost fooling myself from what I learned as a child, what my story is about, my needs don't matter. Working through that limiting belief and realizing the truth behind all of this, that my needs do matter, and that if I am not seeking my own joy, it shows up every day in how I parent, how I show up as a husband and a partner, how I show up as an employee. Just feeling stuck, and I don't feel stuck anymore, because when I'm feeling something, I'm feeling discomfort. Okay, what do I do to get out of discomfort? I need to be in nature. Shan, I would love to be able to go for a hike in about an hour or so on my own. Do you have anything going on then? Nope. See ya. Bye. Kicks me out the door. I mean, it's great. It's like I no longer feel this need for validation or permission. I express my needs. She receives them, and that's it. I mean,
It's also very hot. I always tell him he's very hot when he asserts himself and he tells me his needs.
yeah.
It's not a leadership role.
Yeah. And a lot of it too, James, is I credit a lot of it to my morning practices that aren't consistent, but when I feel the need, I do a drop in meditation, 10 minutes, focusing on my breath, breathing, eyes closed, just trying to not be distracted by social media or something, just having time to myself in a quiet space. And I've also implemented a lot of box breathing, just like I was doing it in the car the other day because I just felt rattled about something. And so breath work, meditation, those are, you'll hear those words come out of my mouth a lot when I'm talking about my practice or what I'm doing to self-regulate and be able to show up in more of a healthy masculine. So yeah, that's kind of my answer there.
I love that. I think, I really believe that patriarchy has hurt men and women, right? I
Yeah.
mean, women, I think it's fairly obvious, right? The, violence, sexual assault, domestic violence, lack of power, lack of holding positions of power, making less money, all those things. Like it's pretty obvious in those sides. And then the ways I think that patriarchy has hurt men that we don't always acknowledge is that lack of emotional kind of intelligence and then as a result being able to get your needs met emotionally, right? Because historically men have not been allowed to appear weak, and admitting, hey, I don't really love myself can feel, I think, really vulnerable and scary to men because that shows some sort of weakness, right? Whereas women, because we were already in that position of kind of the I'm quoting weaker sex, I think we've been able, and, we've been generally stereotypically allowed to express emotion. We've been able to express those, talk to each other, build each other up, talk about self-love. And so I think, a big part of women gaining kind of power and confidence and coming into their own we've been able to do all of that and been about, yeah, let's find my self-love and let's find empowerment. I think men are just kind of, and it's encouraging getting to that now, where they're, men like you and James and Jordan and, that whole crew are being like, oh yeah, I have emotions, I have needs. Like, let's figure out how to talk about those, how to talk about them with other men too, which I think is really important.
Jordan says, and I learned this, like, what's best for me is best for everyone. I think that goes for both people in the relationship. And dare I say, especially for men, because we're like, oh, I've got to give and give. We end up giving beyond capacity. We end up leaving ourselves out. And so when we do what's best for ourselves, it becomes best for everyone. And as Shannon says, it's pretty hot. Plug for that. And what I'm curious about next is the idea that I think there's a fear of stepping into this. Like, hey, we've got this we're fine. On a scale of 1 to 10, our relationship's at like a 7, that like seductive 7. Like it's not really bad enough to want to do anything, but it starts to slide pretty quick, especially when the hormones start to change, right? Or somebody has their awakening of what they're worth and what they're willing to stand for and what they're willing to put up with. And so there's this fear of stepping into this kind of work because it can rock the boat. And so what I'm curious about is, have you noticed that, once you cleared the backlog, you've been together a lot of years before you stepped into doing this kind of approach to intentional relating, right? Did it get easier? And does it get easier after you clear the backlog, or is it something that you still practice on a regular basis?
Ooh,
Or both?
that's a great question.
It's a super question.
Yeah, I feel like it's gotten so much easier, so much easier. And I love that frame of the backlog, because there were decades of that. And the first few months of us working on this, we looked ridiculous and sounded ridiculous. We had an island in our kitchen, and we were walking around and we were like taking deep breaths and looking at each other. And it was like, the story I'm telling myself is, what's coming up for me right now is I'm feeling a burning in my stomach. And our kids now still, they mock us because they think they're like, "Oh, your nervous system, but it's so nice, because he's like, and I don't know if you're familiar with the 5 personality patterns or the energy patterns of overwhelm. That's been very supportive in our experiences, understanding when in overwhelm, how do we show up? What do we do to try to feel safe? He will leave. He will leave energetically where he's not in his body, and I will try to merge. So if I feel the disconnect in his heart, I'm like, where did you go? I need that connection. And so I've learned that I can be with myself, even if I don't feel the heart connection. And he's learned to stay in his body. So he'll just be like, I really want to leave right now, but I'm choosing to stay. I'm choosing to stay. I'm choosing to stay. And I'm like, I'm in my experience. This is not mine. I love him where he's at, just constantly reminding ourselves. But now it's like, you good? I'm not, but I got me. Okay. And it's just such a breath of fresh air. And there's so much ease and space for us to lean into fun things that we want to do individually and together. So yes, I love that question.
Yeah, and I'll add to it. My analogy of the backlog and all that is, I'm a runner, and I ran an ultra marathon a few years ago. And as you're training for running, the first run you go on is hard, maybe 4 miles, whatever. And it's a lot. You feel gross. Maybe you're a little overweight, whatever. And after, 12 weeks of running, like a religious running regiment where you don't miss a day, you stick to the training program. It's kind of like doing this work. If you're sticking to, you don't even have to call it a program, just a practice of whatever that looks like for you, a walk, whatever. For the runner in me, as I got more and more mileage in, it became easier. And that's very similar to this work. It's become easier. But, oh, by the way, I still have knee pains here, or I still maybe have a bad day where the run isn't so good. And that's kind of how the work shows up. It's like, yes, it's easier. I'm doing breath work or meditation, or, we're having connected, we're scheduling dates together where we're connecting. But that doesn't mean there still aren't some pains here and there. They're just, I guess, more infrequent. And when they do show up, they're more manageable. I've noticed pings on my nervous system constantly that I was never aware of before. I'm like, I wonder what that's about. I stay curious with it. And most of the time I know what I need to regulate that, whatever that emotion is that's coming up. We talk about equanimity a lot in meditation, and it's just allowing a feeling to be there and just let it kind of move through you without judgment or feeling like you have to fight it or change it. And I think awareness is just such a big piece of all this, really becoming more aware of your feelings in your body and emotions. I would say, yes, the backlog is clear, but there's always work to be done. It's just more manageable.
So, one of the things I noticed in your story that I think is true for a lot of people is that oftentimes when we look at personal development work in couples, oftentimes one person starts doing the work first, right? And that was in your story, right? So, Shannon, you were doing all this personal development work. And I imagine it kind of highlighted where Steve was at, right? And that he wasn't there. And so what I love about your story is, because sometimes we'll get the question like, well, what if I'm willing to do the work, but my spouse isn't? right? And my response, and I feel like I see it in your story, is then do the work, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes the best thing you can do for your relationship is you doing your own work, and then less about nagging, but more about modeling, then the person is able to come along, right? And it sounds like that's kind of what happened to you is because you had done the work, Shannon, you were able to present or come to Steve from a place of love and go, hey, I love you. I notice you're not happy, and I want you to be happy. It feels like, I'll just speak for me. If I hadn't done that work, I'm much more likely to come to James as like, well, you're disconnected and you're never, I'm a lot more blaming than owning, just like, and curious about what I'm.
Then I'm a lot more
saying.
likely to get defensive.
And not do the work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. And so I love that it sounds like you were able to come to him in love. And because you were essentially modeling what this personal development work had done for you, it allowed him to be open to it. Right. And then step into his own. And then you kind of be able to be a support for him as he's going through the work. And while I think it's really important to grow together, I think, it's also just sometimes we just start with ourselves,
Because that's what you can control.
Yeah.
And I had done the nagging a lot. So I don't want to I tried the nagging.
And that
I
didn't work.
tried there was such it was confronting because I was a sexual health educator trying to help people have a healthy relationship. And here I was, even the time that we knew each other, talking to people about how to have a good relationship. And I was under the surface saying, we have to figure this out. There was like a tension and an energy of you're the problem. And once I realized, oh wait, no, it really does take two to tango. I can figure my part out. When in doubt, I'm going to figure out how I can be the best parent, the best version of myself. Because in the end, we're likely not going to die at the same time, right? So we're not going to be together I want to give the gift that my kids have a parent that's healthy and functioning and confident. And I want to model that so that they can do that as well. And then with Steve, him knowing that if he leaves, just knowing that we're going to be okay in the most loving way possible. And honestly, when I heard about conscious uncoupling, it was like a mind shift for me. I actually went to that place of, okay, I don't want the nasty divorce, but if we went through a conscious uncoupling experience, what would that look like? And so my nervous system kind of got used to that, like, yeah, that could happen and we wouldn't die, but is that what I really want? And that's not what I wanted. So presenting it to Steve was great. And also there's a part in the conscious uncoupling that is making amends with yourself. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but some of the people that I work with that are wanting to have a better relationship, it's looking at what was the part that you played to get here and what are you releasing and what are you claiming radical self-responsibility for? And so that was a chance for me to look in the mirror and say, I was not super pleasant to be married to all the time either. We're both playing a part in this. There's no objectivity to who's doing this right or wrong. We both played a part. So that was super helpful in kind of painting that picture. And doing that just allowed me more space to continue to work on myself and take the pressure off of him. And it was really beautiful. Last year, I remember there were a couple times where you're like, thank you for letting me be in this space. He kind of had like just a season of sadness and frustration and, work stuff. And where I used to be like, what can I do? How can we fix this? He was like, thank you for just letting me be in this space because I don't feel like I'm broken. I feel like you believe in me that I'm going to figure this out. And I was like, yeah, I totally trust you. I know you've got you. And that just feels really good.
And it sounded like a lot of that happened before the hormonal shifts of perimenopause started to become a part of your relationship. So let's talk a little bit about that shift into the new season of how hormones started to really be a bigger factor.
Yeah. And I love, before you answer, I love that you call it midlife magic because people talk about like a midlife crisis and the words I've used has been midlife liberation. So I think it's kind of similar, but I like magic. Like that's, equally as good, if not better than liberation. Yeah, just touching too on how that's changed your own relationship with your sexuality and how that comes to your marriage and your connection. Yeah. Just share your wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so grateful because of the space that I'm in, I started having the space that I'm in for work as a sexual health educator. When I turned 41, 42, that's when I noticed something was different, and friends were calling me and past clients, and they're like, what is happening? I hate my husband. I'm having a hard time sleeping. And it turns out that the history of menopause has not been set up for liberation or magic. And if anything, it's really been this idea of trying to make it go away, this anti-aging. And so I started to do more work around understanding my cycle and my emotions. And that was like a great foundation of being in this capacity of things are going to happen and I'm going to be okay. But I would really like to dig into more joy. When we have more joy and we have more connection, it really opens us to more possibilities. And so the work that I have been doing with a lot of women is reflecting on the inner child, because there's a lot of wisdom that we can learn from this metaphor of our emotions. So the inner child is like a metaphor for our emotions and our nervous system. So when something happens where you're just heightened in sensation and discomfort and emotion, it's more than likely like your inner child's like, I did not learn something or process something that I needed to know, and this feels unsafe. And so this whole experience has been not only learning how to support yourself with better sleep and supplements and all of those things, but looking at what is no longer serving you, because this time is where the estrogen that we used to have feeding the part of the brain that wants us to be part of the tribe and be liked and all of that, it starts to soften. So you literally give less fucks. You're like, okay, this is just not working. And the shell that's holding everything together starts to crack. And that is like, you've got to release it. Otherwise, trying to hold it all together just makes that decade-long experience of going from perimenopause to menopause a more intense ride. But learning how to surrender, let your partner know, I'm not really sure what's happening right now, but I'm going to need some space. As a matter of fact, I'm going to sleep in the guest bedroom for the next few nights. I need to sleep better. I'd love to go for a walk with you. And maybe you go on that walk, you schedule a walk, and you're like, I want to walk with you, but I would prefer that we not talk. Just really getting clear with what it is that you need and speaking out loud can be so powerful. And there's this, the part of our hearing our voice is another way of that self-love and self-confidence, and also helps connect yourself to the sacral area, pelvic, the reproductive system. So that connection of speaking your needs and honoring your truth, it's just a feedback loop that helps yourself open to more fun, pleasurable experiences. I had a roller skating birthday party for my 50th, and I've been going dancing, and we've connected with different friends and making different hobbies and doing a lot of things that my inner child really enjoyed doing, more rest and play and being outside and going swimming. And that's just helped ease the experience more for me. And I imagine for you too, because I know you've shared that it's taking the pressure off of him, like he has to do something. It's not his to fix. Yeah. So it's been such a gift to me. And then now to get to share that with other women, I have a retreat twice a year it's for women 40 and up. And it's really just a 4-day experience of getting to uncover, like, what are the things that we're holding on to that are no longer serving us? What are the patterns that you're going to break moving forward? And being in community is like a fast forward for that experience.
And would you say that that is primarily what and who you work with at this stage in your entrepreneurship endeavors?
I would say so. I would say that's the majority of the people that I work with. I work with people through coaching online, and then retreats. And then also I have an office here at a community center where we're doing monthly midlife magic experiences. Like Sunday, in a couple days, we have an intuitive art experience where we're creating and taking time to play and remember our creative juices and how they're connected to our sensuality.
I love what you're doing, Shannon. So if people want to work with you or find you, what is the best way to do that?
You can go on Instagram, and it's Shannon Hamaker, ShannonHam as in Mary, AKER.com.
We're
And
kind
you
of
can
hitting
find
the off ramp here, y'all. Thanks for listening. Steve, I want to hear like your top tip for being married to somebody you deeply love during the menopause phase of life.
Are you asking for a friend, honey?
Asking for a friend.
Nah.
I recently told him he chewed loudly, and he told me that he looked it up, and ChatGPT told him it was a sign of perimenopause. That he
Yes.
chewed loudly.
I don't actually chew loudly.
Like, do you have to breathe?
Yeah, I would say that it's funny. There's a word that just keeps popping up in my world around all of this work, and it is amplified with the perimenopause experience, and that is curiosity. Be curious. Why is she more forgetful than she was before menopause? Why is her libido spiking and dying and spiking again, perimenopause? I've learned that the more questions I ask from a loving, curious way and leaving judgment out in the front yard, I think has really worked well for me. Would you say? There are times when I'm dysregulated, the judgment creeps in, and I just have to ask where this is coming from, like what needs of mine are not being met. We have there are slips. I worked really hard to figure out the cycles of a menstruation, and now I'm having to reprogram myself to understand that there are no cycles anymore. It's just kind of whatever's present is what I'm experiencing. Curiosity, James. That's the word.
What a beautiful note. What a beautiful love that you two have intentionally built. Not easy and just so worth it.
Yeah.
It's our rapid fire. I will say we'll put their contact information. So if you are in that midlife magic and you want to embrace it lovingly and joyously, like Shannon is doing in her work, then we'll put her contact information in our show notes. And then we have a series of rapid fire questions we like to ask couples. So the first one is, what do you call each other? What are your pet names for each other?
Fummy, Fummy. It is probably a year 1 or year 2 name that came up, and how it came up, I don't really think I remember anymore. I'm sure alcohol was involved, and Fummy. Yeah,
Okay.
it's something, some word mix up or usage that just turned into Fummy, and it's people, like kids are annoyed by it, family members are like, what? And we just keep doing it.
I love it.
Who makes the bed and how many pillows are on it?
I make the bed. You do too.
I make the bed.
We both have our own beds now.
Yeah.
During perimenopause, we have our own, which has been fun because we have little date days and date nights. Yes. We learned I'm sleeping so much better.
Yeah, I'm an early riser. She likes to sleep in, and we were just kind of tripping over each other's sleeping experience. So sleep is very important at this age.
Great. So you both make your own beds.
Yes.
Mhm.
Awesome. Who apologizes after a fight first?
Probably you.
You think so?
Well,
I don't know. It's a tie.
yeah.
It's a toss up.
Great. Love it. And what's your favorite snack?
Dark chocolate.
Yeah, especially the granola from Aldi, the chocolate sea salt granola from Aldi.
Oh, I love a good salty sweet combo.
Well, thank you for sharing your hearts, your stories, your love with this audience. Y'all, I hope you lap this thing up. If this is your first time listening, thanks for being on the show and taking a listen. We'd love a review if you haven't had the chance to do that yet. Go grab another episode or two while you're here. And until the next episode, y'all, may your life and love be magnetic.